All right, so I think yeah, we're ready. We're rolling. This is awesome. So we're on our, I guess you could call it number 2 episode because number 1 was split over 2 kind of Mondays. So we're on our second episode, and I think what which we're starting to build a little momentum and getting more excited about this is talking with some really great entrepreneurs and people that have been around the block and have seen business from a different perspective. And we're trying to bring all these ideas together and ask some cool questions and have some great dialogue. And I think that's what the whole concept behind OPN is, which is the Open People Network, where we can all share, have some great dialogue. And then, you know what, at the end of it all, when it's done, we can podcast it and share it with people. And maybe some other entrepreneurs along the way will get some great feedback from that and learn. And maybe even started talking to some of the schools that we work with. And there's interest from them just to kind of throw some of these episodes out in front of their entrepreneurial classes, because same idea, they're getting a little bit of extra learning from people that are hitting the streets doing this great stuff every day. So the way we want to kick it off, though, is I'll make introduce you guys, but I want you guys to kind of give a quick snapshot of who you are and what you do, and we'll kind of jump into some of the discussions and chats after that. So Jay, why don't we start with you, since you're to my right, or I guess if we're facing the other way, to my left. And we'll work our way around the quad and just give a quick snapshot. And one thing I'll throw in is give one detail about you that nobody would know. An example would be that, and I've probably used this before, but I can hold my breath underwater for like 2.5 minutes. So something different. I have no idea if that's a good skill to have, but yeah.
You timed yourself on that?
Yeah, what's that?
You timed yourself on that?
Many times. It actually takes practice. Like, you can't just pop underwater. Like, the panic, and I guess also it's a little tougher. But no, yeah, I don't know why, but it's something to do one day. Maybe I was bored or something. But yeah, so that kind of thing. So anyhow, Jay, I'll kick it over and you can give us a little scoop.
Sure. So my name is Jay Alkaki. So I went to University of Waterloo for software engineering, then started a company called Sweet Tooth after starting a consulting company in the e-commerce space. Sweet Tooth picked up, and we grew the company and raised $2.5 million from some big investors. And now it's the most popular e-commerce loyalty platform in the world. And later on, I decided I want to do something else. So left the company. My co-founder took over as CEO. I went and did my MBA at the Ivy Business School, and then decided I wanted to get back into tech e-commerce. So joined BigCommerce down south in Texas. And since then, sold one of my software companies that I had started while I was doing the MBA, actually. And that was officially a couple months ago, or last month. And that's it. Yeah, and so one thing about me, I could speak 4 languages, not including programming languages, if you consider those.
So English, what were the languages?
English, French, Arabic, and mostly Spanish.
Nice.
And relatively fluent in Spanish. English, French, Arabic, mostly French, yeah. Mostly Spanish.
I like it. Might need my new translator. It's good. Rob, you're on.
My name is Rob Mackenzie. I got my start as an entrepreneur during university. I was a college pro painting franchisee. And after that, I ended up in sales, selling photocopiers. And that's kind of what inspired my first startup, which I did after going to Ivy and doing an MBA. Did that for about 12 months and had to fold it, learned a lot of lessons along the way. And then since then, I've joined a dev shop as their sales and marketing person, and also worked for the government like Mars and Haltech, consulting with startups. And now I work for a startup called Maripost based in Toronto that does email marketing, and I do sales and marketing for Maripost. And one thing about me, Well, something that not many people know. When I was a little kid, hey Roxanne.
Hello.
Oh my God! I think the issue was I didn't upgrade to my ISO. I've been doing so much traveling. And how do you get rid of this window, Megan? Right here. Davey probably has chargers for this one.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Nice to meet you all. So it's good. Okay,
Yeah.
I have to ride my bike home and get a charger for my laptop.
And Davey might have it, but if you texted him, it's
Okay.
Anyway,
You
sorry,
guys can.
sorry guys. I had an iMac, an iPhone, and an iPad, and not one of them would let me do this. And I think I'm literally never home the last few months, and I'm afraid to do an ISO update and then hash. And I heard somebody talking about restoration. Like, I can't afford that time. So anyway, now I'm on Megan's computer that's dying. Hi.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're just kind of going around the circle. So Rob's going to say one more thing about something unique that we won't know about him, and then Roxanne, you'll have the floor to give us a quick snapshot of you, and then a thing about that we wouldn't know about you.
Okay.
Okay, so something you wouldn't know about me. When I was like 6 years old, I got thrown in the pool by a swimming instructor, and I was afraid. I had a phobia of water for a long time. But then I subsequently became a competitive swimmer.
So that old saying, like they throw you to the sharks, or however that thing works, that's all true then.
Well, it wasn't for a while. I had to go through, basically to do like cognitive behavioral therapy on myself, essentially, to like get in the pool eventually. But that's what got me interested in psychology, I think, ultimately. Anyway, that's another long story.
That's pretty cool, though.
Your competitive swimming?
Roxanne, you might have to speak into a mic because you're cutting in and out. Like,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, if you have headphones, that'll definitely help.
Let me grab this. I think that's it.
I found it interesting too that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that I've known that have gone through College Pro that started off at in doing that. So I found that kind of pretty fascinating.
You know what? You know what's interesting? More than any other like group of people that I know that are connected to sort of entrepreneurship, the College Pro people, most consistently, like 95% of them are entrepreneurs now or did something entrepreneurial since College Pro.
Totally.
Whereas like even like Ivy people who did the entrepreneurship stream or whatever, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, like I think I sat through. I'm pretty sure, and I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure it was the guy from Team Whistle that he also was a College Pro and went through a bunch of other things before he started his company too. So yeah, there's lots of people that have gone through that. It'd be a fascinating statistic. I think even one of the ladies from our sales, women in sales episode last Monday was the same thing. One of them started in College Pro too. So, all right, Roxanne, you're on. So, little snapshot of who you are, where you came from, and then something that we don't know about you.
Okay. Well, can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay. I come from a very large family, and ironically, I'm like an only child, technically, in a huge family. And I was always the boss. I was called bossy. I really think of it as leadership in its early stages. But I ran kind of little factory situations. I would, line things up. I was always assembling things, or I had an order to things and organizing things. And when, I went through teaching, I was an art teacher for a decade, and then designed a harness for my dog. And it just seemed like it was a natural fit. Like when I ended up running a factory, I looked back and I thought, there were signs. So that to me is kind of interesting in its own right. I mean, I never imagined I would be an entrepreneur with a leather factory. I thought I would be a teacher forever, and in some ways I still am.
Very cool. Honestly, I don't know if it's hard to hear you. Like I think you're cutting out I don't know if it's your internet connection or.
Can you turn off your video?
Let's see. I think it's up. My phone's in. How about that? Turning it up?
We were coming in
How about that?
intermittently, so I'm wondering if it's
Sounds like it's connection.
It sounds like you have a connection into it. It's a bit slower.
Because Megan's computer is on low battery right now.
So it might be cutting it down to I don't know.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. It just like as you talk, it slows down and then it cuts out, picks back.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, she should be back momentarily, but I can repeat a little bit of that after.
You might have to wait until she's back just because it's cutting out so much it's hard to hear anything.
Yeah. And now you. Okay. Yeah, I think it's because the computer's dying.
Okay. Well, we'll keep going, and then I guess it just might be a little tougher to hear you until she gets back and gives you.
Okay. Okay.
But I think so. Just to jump into the MVP thing. So I think the key to obviously the conversation we wanted to have was that everybody's got a strong background and things around being an entrepreneur, which is amazing. And I think the key for me is when you decided to go in the direction that you are now with the business that you're in and going through that MVP or building an MVP, which is your minimal viable product, what was and what is some advice that you would give that would be probably valuable that you could say to any sort of person that wants to get into the space and wants to build a product? How do you get to your MVP? What is an MVP to you, and what does that mean? And a good example for me was that 10 years ago when I started, MVP didn't exist because software wasn't as mature. So people were building everything, and it was, instead of just building out a page, they would be building out a 40-page document. Like everything was very deep and rich, whereas now you can really basically start off with just a quick page with some details on it and start to grow and iterate from there. So there's been a lot of change over the years. So maybe, Rob, we can start with you and just kind of give that idea perspective of what you found was the best way to get to an MVP and what that MVP would consist of.
Sure. Well, I'm going to answer that question, I guess, by maybe like telling a story that is kind of current.
For sure.
I don't have my own business now. Like I said, I work for a startup called Maripost, but I like to think, so I would think of an MVP as like a lower fidelity way of testing your assumptions and learning a really crucial piece of information quickly. So like testing a really risky assumption that if you disprove that assumption, it would kind of sink your whole business, right? And getting to that really quickly so that you don't go all in without actually testing that in sort of a lower risk way. So, I mean, I'll use an example that hopefully it's not a tech example, but maybe it's applicable to like any other business. There's a corner store like around the corner down the street from me that just opened up, and it had been being built for like a really long time. So everybody was kind of anticipating what was going to be in there. And it ended up being another convenience store that also like served like diner kind of food. And there's many convenience stores in the area, so that it doesn't really differentiate itself that way. And there's a lot of like places to get food. So there's not really much that kind of sets it apart. And one day I told him, like, you know what would be really great here is if you sold ice cream, because nobody else sells ice cream like anywhere. And his response to me was, well, it would cost me like $7,000 to start selling ice cream. So I'd have to buy like the whole like fridge and everything to start selling ice cream. And I was like, why don't you just change your sign so that it says ice cream, and then print out like 100 little coupons that say like free ice cream cone, and just see how many people come in and try to buy ice cream. If anybody comes in and tries to buy ice cream, give them a free coupon for free ice cream. And if you get rid of your like 100 coupons, and you know that 100 people wanted ice cream, and that is enough to at least let you know that there's a demand, you know? So his thought was, it's going to cost me like $7,000 to completely set myself up to sell ice cream. But really, the MVP in that situation is as easy as just kind of like changing his chalkboard sign and printing out a few coupons. So that's kind of like a non-tech example of how you could use the concept of an MVP to test a business idea.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree. That's a great way to explain it. A lot of people think that they need to go out and get the fridge, but the truth is, just go to a grocery store, pick up like 7 different types of ice cream, put them under put it in your freezer, and just start serving the ice cream. Like, they don't have to see you scooping it. And if they do see you scooping it from this like pre-made one, then just tell them, we're out of ice cream or something. Like, make up a story of why. But
exactly.
If they are there, then that answers the question. And once you get that question, then you can go invest the $7,000. So that is a great way to explain it.
And what was the outcome? Did he do that?
No, I'm still working on him. I'm still working on him. He started selling Jamaican patties, but I don't know. I want ice cream in the neighborhood. So
the problem,
yeah.
I think a scary thing, people are scared to do MVPs a lot of time because they think that they're going to be judged on the quality of it. So they'll think, I can't release this, I can't put this out because now everyone's going to think this is what we are and this is our business and that's it, right? But the truth is, that's my theory of why people don't do more MVPs. And in this store, in our example, maybe he just thinks, I want to be a legitimate, I want to feel like a legitimate business, and I don't want to have to go to my employees and say, scoop out of this thing I just bought from the grocery store locally, right? But the truth is, nobody cares. Like, in the MVP stage, nobody cares. Like, it really, and even if they do care, is it worth? It's so worth the data that you gather for you not to make a bad investment.
For sure, I think he's worried about the idea of like saying that he's selling ice cream when he's not. Like he's lying to his customers or something like that. But I mean, that's why sort of like offering the free coupon kind of mitigates that, because it creates sort of a little bit of delight. It's like, oh, actually we're not selling ice cream, but like, here's a coupon or something, or like, whatever. There's a lot of different ways of doing it, but I think people in software have been really friendly to the concept of an MVP, but like, it's really just applicable to almost any kind of business.
Do you find that a lot of the time people have in their mind what they want to do, and they don't always want to go out to see what the rest of the market is doing or what the market will appreciate them to do? So because he started a company or started a business saying, I just want to be a convenience store, I don't care that there's other convenience stores, I know convenience stores, so that's what I'm going to do. And then you coming there with this whole different concept could probably make him millions. But he's like, selling ice cream is so beneath me. I do convenience stores. So you're changing the way he views his business. And because he didn't maybe come up with it, but that whole perspective changes the whole platform, which is the same idea in tech and in software, is that I come in saying that I want to build X. And nobody wants to do this pivot. Everybody hates pivoting, but pivoting is created because of how the market treats the product. So if you don't start with something to get that taste for what everybody wants, then you'll just continue to build something and maybe have 5 users when you could have had 500 users. It's that fear, I guess, or in my take it is anyways, it's a fear. And I don't know if you guys agree with that, but it almost feels like I'm just structured so well to do one thing. And if it has to be pivoted, I don't think I can do that, or I'm not willing to do that with where I am now because too many things, variables that I can't manage.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much exactly right. I think there's a big fear around failure. I mean, I guess you're kind of touching on like 3 things. One is like optionality or pivoting. The other one is like MVPs, and which are related to pivoting, and then also fear of failure, which is also like its own whole topic that you probably could go.
Yeah, that's in like 2 weeks. We're gonna do one on failures, but it's a tough one though, because it's admitting that it's not admitting, it's being able to say that you've done that, right? It's a fear of saying that I like Rob said, where I did something for 12 months and I had to stop it. There becomes that I feel like I wasn't my best and I had to tell everybody this, but really at the end of the day, the key that you said about that is I got a lot of learning from that. You know what? I should be proud of the fact that I, one, started it, two, I got it to 12 months, and that the learning I got from this is going to allow for me to do a million more things and be that much better at everything else I do going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, actually admitting it to myself that was a huge load off. Once I finally did, I was able to see like the other kind of opportunities around me. But it was definitely like a positive experience. Actually, it's one of those things that the fear of doing that is worse than actually doing it. So the fear of failing is
nothing to fear but fear itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had the last small software company that sold and had Sweet Tooth, which was really successful. But I put out so much stuff. Like I probably like build a new thing like every year, like several things, like every year, and a lot of them fail. But on MVPs, just around.
What happened?
Wait, did we just lose?
No, we're good. We're good.
Rob? Oh,
Yeah,
no,
there it is. What happened?
Yeah, okay, so we didn't lose. Okay, so anyways, I was saying one recent MVP, kind of going back to the MVP discussion that I had. Actually, this was during the MBA at Ivy. I had this theory that I wanted to like repel Canada geese, because like who loves Canada geese? Like I don't think anyone loves those Canada geese, especially on campuses where they just like hiss at you no matter where you're walking. It's so frustrating. So my idea was that so geese have like polarized eyes. Actually, birds have polarized eyes. So I wanted to see if I could use a laser to basically throw off their flying, so they wouldn't fly on the grass. So it'd be like a total like chemical free, super like, and it was relatively safe for the geese as long as they weren't dumb and just sat there and stared at the laser. So my MVP was basically I just went out and got a laser, the laser that I could get, walked over to the field in Ivy, back behind in the newer building. I'm not sure if you were there with the new building, Rob, but and I just literally took the laser and started like shining it in the eyes of geese, and lo and behold, they did not give two craps, and they just sat there and continued to crap all over the lawn. And I was like, okay, there's my MVP. It doesn't work.
Didn't work.
So
it was a good test.
Cool.
It was a good test.
It was a great test. Yeah, it costed me the cost of like this. I wanted to get like a green laser, so it was a particular type of laser they had to get, which was a so my total costs were like $70 for that, and then literally just waiting, ordering it from China, getting through customs, and then asking questions while you're ordering a laser that can go 3 kilometers in length, and then trying it. That was the MVP. That was like one of the MVPs of many. I do like an MVP like probably several a year, and most of them fail.
Wow.
No, that's great.
All of my hardware MVPs have failed, but hardware is really, really hard. But that's why Kickstarter is so amazing. Kickstarter is a way to mitigate the costs to do an MVP in the hardware field, which is very, very difficult.
And I was going to mention that one of the things that, and similar to you, done the same thing. I love kind of testing stuff out and see where it falls. And one of them with 3D printing is kind of allowed for that as well, where you can mock up a product quite quickly. And then as soon as you have that product, you can test it out, see if it works. I have a couple right now that I'm working on getting printed. One of them is a hardware-based product. So it's a home fix-it tool. So I'm actually going to get one of those printed. So it'll be kind of neat, and then see where it nets out from there. And if it works, then we'll figure out how to get it built, right?
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, no, I think 3D printing is awesome for MVPs.
Yeah, we have a 3D printer. It actually needs. Can you hear me?
Yep, it's way better.
Okay. We need to get something fixed on it, but man, did we push that thing hard. For prototyping, it's amazing because we get something sent, wait till it came back, and we want to modify one little thing, and then you're sending it back, and then we got this printer in-house. It was just like bing, 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 amazing. And our trade show booth that we that we use multiple times of the year. We've constructed ourselves in-house, and all the components that hold all the parts together were made in-house on a 3D printer. So it's really quite amazing.
Awesome.
Great tool. Great tool.
I'm going to send over some drawings to you so that you can have them 3D printed.
Let me get it fixed first.
No, that's very cool.
Did we lose Rob?
Yeah, we lost Rob.
Yeah, we lost him.
We got Roxanne, we lost Rob.
Yeah. Oh, here he comes. He's back. He's back.
Yeah, it's a bit of a thing, isn't it?
Right.
Oh, it's a bit of a testy product, I guess, but it's all good. We're fans of it, so.
Well, it's happening. It's happening. So.
Exactly. Okay, so I think maybe Roxanne, just now that you're back in and everything's working, maybe you could give us a snapshot of yourself, and then one thing about you that we'd all not know that we should know, and then we'll kind of just keep moving along.
Okay, I think what I did, the little story I did tell was about me being one of many kids in a very large family, and even though I wasn't quite the oldest, it was kind of a couple families together. I still acted. I was called bossy. And I really like to think of it more as my leadership skills starting at a very early age. And it really just, it really was something I carried all through. I would, I set up little classrooms at home, and I would have my sisters do homework. They'd have to get it signed. And there was always a little factory that I had going where I was making things, and the junk drawer was designated for me at my grandparents' house. And then I did teach. I was a teacher for a decade and got a little dog that needed a harness, hence Buddy Belt. And, I run a factory. And when I looked back and thought about it, it didn't seem so far-fetched. Like, if I thought about it in hindsight, yes, but running a factory, the organization, and, just all the little parts, the inventory, the massive kind of amount of energy it takes to keep track of everything. I think in some ways those were natural things inherent in me, but I had no idea that it would end up like this, that I would be running my own company and designing products. And yeah, so it's very fascinating for me that way. And people never knew that, or I never knew that that's where it would end up.
Wow, that's a cool
Sometimes
story.
it takes entrepreneurship to find you.
Yeah, true.
Have you seen the
product?
movie Joy?
Yes, and it was a product designed out of necessity, so for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joy is wonderful. She's actually out there in the world speaking and traveling and present, telling her story, which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. If you probably took all the skill sets of where you got to now, so the businesses that you work for, you would probably find that going back in time, all the little things you did as a kid and as a high schooler and all the way through, you would probably define where you are now. You may not think of it, and then you start going back and saying, "Well, I had a paper route when I was 8 years old. I delivered flyers when I was, and I did all." And I'm like, "Wow, I can't believe all these things I did when I was a kid, for whatever the reason was. Oh my God, I should have been an entrepreneur. Why didn't someone tell me this when I was 12? Because I could have been a lot earlier to the stage than when I was, right?"
Being independent, making money, being in control of what you were doing. I mean, those things all resonate, right? And to this day, really, and for everybody here, I can sense that.
No, for sure. So one thing about you that we wouldn't know.
One thing about me that you wouldn't know?
Or that nobody would know about you.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, my family, how big it is. Yeah, it's my background. I grew up in mixed family situation, mobile home, trailer park, in the boonies. And I was a survivor and determined, strong will, and it's just, that's not how I see myself. I mean, that's still where home is, and home is home. There was nothing to compare it to, so that's what I knew then. And it's an interesting story for sure. And people do not associate me with that visual.
That's pretty cool. Hey, we all have different upbringings and learnings, right? So you got to take that and go with it.
Yeah. And family's pretty, I mean, everybody has some kind of crazy family story. At least I feel that they do. And if they don't admit it, then I think maybe they're not telling the truth.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so I guess maybe one of the things that I'm curious about is the learning, or one thing that you learned in putting this MVP. So we've all told some interesting stories of the MVPs that we test and things that we do. What are the things that really define an MVP for you? So if it was one thing that you would say to somebody, do this and this is going to define it or help you, what would that one thing be? If you can bucket it, because we've all tested things and everything else. So is that it? Just test your theory as cheaply as possible, and that's the first thing you would recommend, or is there something else?
For me, it is. It's like, get it out there, get it on the dog. For the most part, it's, you know, it's a product that needs to be used. And I love the feedback that comes from our customers. They'll say, like, this is too big, or that's too wide, or it's not, you know, it's not, the weight is too heavy, or it's too thick, or, you know, all little details. And if you don't put it out there, then you go through a lot of time and energy and present something that you end up having to change anyway. So do that first. I think
the most important thing to me with an MVP and the MVPs that I've made is to number one, see it for yourself. Sometimes it sounds amazing when you talk about it and you think about it and you plan, and then you just do it and you put it out and you're like, wow, this looks really, really dumb. And like an example of that would be like the Segway. It's like, you know, it was, everything about it was perfect. Everything, all the theories, all the studies about where people were moving and the urbanization, and then you know, they put it out and they realized that people felt they looked weird on it, and so nobody wanted to look weird and stand out on it because they were a foot taller than everyone else since they stuck out. And then number two is figure out if customers are willing to pay for it, because out of the dozens of MVPs that I've done, the only ones that succeeded were the ones that when it came down to the person who was paying the money, they would pay the money. Like I'm saying, not saying say that they will pay the money, literally pay the money. Okay? If they are not willing to put money down, then it means meaningless. It is meaningless. I will download your app. I will download my friend's sister's, you know, nephew's app like every day. Like, I don't care. Like, I'll do it. But when it comes down to like making me put down money for something, that's what really answers the question: is this a product that's needed? And or it's solving a pain? And out of the, like, you know, the dozens, after I've tried it for myself and seen that it actually does work, and then I would say 50% of them will actually work when I try them, and then like 99% of them or 95% of them, when it gets the customer that said that they were willing to pay for it, I ask them, hey, this is exactly what you asked for. Are you willing to pay for it? And, you know, it's not done yet, but this is exactly. And they go, and then they're like, cool, time to pivot.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, though.
Yeah, I would agree that person being willing to pay for it is super important. That was like a big piece of learning from my experience. Different people have talked about it in different ways. So I remember one of my Ivy profs calling it a bleeding neck wound. So the problem is a neck wound. People really have to be that they're willing to pay for it. And another description is Noah Kagan, who's a Austin entrepreneur, runs AppSumo, talked about you know, where is your product on the totem pole of like customers' priorities. And one of the big learnings from my company and why I ultimately folded it is because I realized that it was on the bottom of the totem pole. I was talking about, my product was essentially one that helped people do cost cutting. And people, it's harder to talk to people about cost cutting than it is to talking about growing their revenue. And so now I'm selling a product that grows people's revenue, and it's amazing how much easier it is to talk to people about that. My company was selling a product that would help people sort of reduce some of the waste that they were some of the waste that they were spending on like machine leases, specifically photocopiers initially. It was kind of like a lease busters for photocopiers. What I ultimately found was that even though everybody had this problem, and it seemed really acute to me, people weren't willing to pay for it because often it wasn't their money either. I was dealing with people who were like working within businesses, and it was on the budget, and it was always on the budget. And even though it was this giant waste of money, and I could show them that it was adding up to thousands of dollars a year, tens of thousands over a few years, when it came down to actually kind of changing what they were doing, it was like, oh, well, like, you know, it's not something that the CEO often has time for, talking about saving like a few $1,000s. But the CEO always has time for how can I grow the business. So those are two things that I really remember is kind of like where is it on the totem pole of priorities, and is it a bleeding neck wound? So the MVP really is something that allows you to kind of learn that. That's what you really want to learn is do people care enough about this to pay for it? And what's the fastest way that you can test that?
No, those are great points. I think I was thinking about this today, and I was thinking, well, if you were to build multiple MVPs, do you think you could be successful at that? And you just kind of touched on the exact point why that doesn't work very well. And it's the fact that when you're trying to start a multitude of things and you went in and cost cutting inside of a business, people didn't care. They're like, oh, whoa, man, you're telling me I'm spending a lot of money. It's not my money, so I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing. So there's always not that mental break, which means that if I'm starting an MVP and I hire a team to go and build out this MVP, their brain just says, I got to build at no cost and just get it done. And if you're trying to do that multiple times, then I find that there isn't a stopgap. There isn't a way to prevent those wrongdoings from happening because you can't pay attention to everything. You can't be inside of each business. You can't do all those things. So that whole saying where it says, you know, focus on one thing and do it great, I think that really does come down to the same thing. If you're going to take a product or an MVP, you really do need to take that one yourself, take it under your belt, because it's your ideas, it's your way of making this work and thinking about how it's going to work. And if you try to hand that off to somebody else, you might find that they might come up with different experiences in different ways, but they're never going to be able to prove it the way you did or the way you would expect the outcome to be.
I think that the difficulty with doing multiple MVPs is that you lose passion in what you're doing. It spreads yourself, in my opinion, thin. I don't think it's totally impossible to put out things, but at some point you're going to have to drop the other ones and go 100%, go full speed against one of your ideas, or decide what you're willing to, you know, given the gathered data, which one do you want to invest to gather the next set of data, and then just keep progressing.
And Roxanne, you find that when you're putting products together, because there's always one product that does well, and then you can start to focus on expanding this one product to make it great. But you've got a whole world that you can hit that one product on. So do you become like Steam Whistle? And I use that because I found I can't remember his name, the guy that runs the company, to be quite fascinating. The fact that he was like, we're going to do one thing and we're going to do it great, and nothing else is going to get in the way, and we're just going to do Steam Whistle beer for the next 30 years and just one beer. So do you find the same thing in your product when you were, I'm going to build one product and that's it, I can't focus on anything else? But then as an entrepreneur, you're like, wait a second, shiny penny, look at this, there's another great product, I should build it. I know. It's so much market here.
You know, it's a really good point. And I know something that I have said over the years to people who have asked questions and wanted to kind of be in, you know, get a little bit of inspiration and insight, was about keeping your eye on the ball. And I have one product. That's the bloodline. That basically, that is what drives this company. And when I have taken my eye off the ball, and more recently, that happened with a new product. It was the first year that, you know, we suffered. in numerous ways. And so some decisions were made and the reins were pulled back, and it's like eye on the ball. And the only thing that's working is when we do some sort of direct parallel product that basically expands on the same line, but it's the same concept, and people are driven by that, and that's what they want. And so, yeah, I come back to my original word, keep your eye on the ball. And it's so easy to get distracted, like that shiny penny thing. So easy to get distracted. And I can't tell you how many times people are like, why don't you make this? Why don't you try that? Oh, did you ever think about that? And it's like, I've thought about all those things. And yes, I've tried some things, and you should see my prototype bin, and you should see my, the closet or the room that's got all the stuff in it. But, that timing is everything, and it has to be the right match. It has to be the right thing. But yes, keeping your eye on the ball, keeping focused is my job, and that's what works for me.
I think eventually you're going to find, like, when you're doing your MVPs, you come to a point where, let's say, the customers say, you know what, this is it, I got it, this is what I want, and then at that point you have to really switch gears. Now it's time to focus relentlessly on my business. Boom, go 100%. And then, once you hit another wall to figure out next growth point, then you got to take another step back, and you start to MVP again, and you say, okay, well, where do I need to go? Gather the data, and then again, eye on the ball, boom, 100%.
Yeah.
And it's tough to cycle those sometimes. It's because you sometimes might go 100% when you should be actually gathering data, and other times you're gathering data when you should be going 100% and not listening to anyone.
Yeah. And it's hard too, because a lot of the times you were doing a lot of that mental, psychological, physical, whatever, in isolation. Like, there's all these people around you, but there really is a bit of isolation there, and you're the only one really there patting yourself on the back. But it's it's the cycles. You realize if you go through a few of them, you realize that it is part of the nature of the organic growth of your business, of your product, of the life of the business, the life of the product, and you do learn from, where you are, the ebb and flow, I guess, of where you are in that cycle. And yes, and you grab it, and you know when to pull back the reins, and you know when to dig in. So it's a learning process for sure.
So do you guys believe, I'm kind of asking a question here, but
you're allowed.
Do you guys believe that at some point you should stop listening and, for at least a little while, and just and go?
I think there's times for that.
In one sense, like, what do you mean, like outside advisors, or just people telling you all these different things, and you just got to kind of swim your way through it and drive forward?
Yeah, I think in my experience, there's been times where people have said this is the greatest thing ever, and then it doesn't work out. And other times where people are saying, I don't get it, doesn't make any sense to me. But I've already validated the customer base, and I've already validated that people were willing to buy it. And then I just kind of, I feel like sometimes you just have to stop listening. And MVPs, the whole point is listen, right?
Yeah.
But at some point you just got to say, you know what, I got all the data I need. I don't need to continue to listen to people. And because ultimately nobody's going to know the business, probably by the time I'm the MVP, nobody's going to know the business better than you do. And
it's also your gut. Like, I do believe that if you need to follow that, and when you're off base, that feeling when you've been there and you're like, this isn't feeling right, it. And I think you tap into that, and you tune in that, and you refine that as well, just like the ebb and flow of the natural cycles that happen. And it's crucial. Like, I know when I've not listened to that. So,
Jay, when you say that, I think part of it too is like where you got the confidence from, because you're talking about, like, somebody said they don't understand the idea, but then you're relying on this confidence from the test that you just did.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a balance there already. I think the danger can come in where you decide that you're not going to listen to anybody, and then your ego kind of takes over, and you're just kind of like,
oh yeah, you gotta be careful of that.
Right. And you just shut out all information from the outside world, especially information that could tell you when you're going wrong. Right. So
you steer yourself then you steer yourself right into a lake or something, right? So it's got to be like you gotta, like, it's because you gotta jump in between. And at some point, exactly what you said, I really do believe in listening to your heart. I think that we don't, especially me coming from the engineering realm, really my field in tech doesn't give enough credit for listening to your heart, because ultimately that's going to make you happy, and life is ultimately about happiness. And
very much so.
So what if you don't make $1 billion? If you're happy, you're happy.
Yeah.
Well, that depends on your success too, right? Everybody values success differently.
Yeah.
And I think, and Rob, you can attest this because you had to make a call at some point that your MVP wasn't where it needed to be or how it was going to be. So you had to put a stop to that. And that could have been outside influence. It could have been the numbers. It could have been all these different factors. And you could have maybe dragged it on for another 6 months. And there had to be a call or a point where you had to say, you know what, it's not worth, the passion's gone, or the money's gone, or the team just isn't supporting it anymore. There's clients aren't picking up and understanding it as well. So there's probably factors that come along, but I'm probably going to guess that as an entrepreneur, the hardest part of everything that you're going to learn in there isn't so much the factors on money and all those other things. It's the passion. Because if you don't have that passion to support the product that you're going to support and launch, and if everybody else is beating you down, there's that point where you say, okay, you know what? I just lost that. I don't really care anymore. I have to go on to do something else. So for you, was it passion, or was it the factors that drove into that?
So I want to like pick two things that you sort of made me think about in your question there. One was when I decided to stop, the reason I did it when I did was because I set certain goals several months in advance. And I basically said, if I hit these milestones, then I'm going to keep going. And if I don't hit the milestones, then that's like the hard stop. And so that's how I decided. I almost like removed myself from that decision by setting those in advance, you know? The second thing was the passion piece. And I'm reading this book right now called Essentialism, actually listening to the audiobook. But one of the things that it talks about is it's sort of like doing, it's all about resisting the urge to try to do everything and just kind of paring yourself down to the sort of like things that really matter to you, the things that you're good at. And it encourages you to ask questions like 3 questions. Am I interested and passionate in this? Is it something that I'm uniquely qualified for? And do people want this? And the third one is kind of like the MVP question, right? The second one is also important. It's sort of like related to what we were just saying about, you know, keeping your eye on the ball. Like, is this something that you're sort of like uniquely qualified or have a strength to do? But the first thing is sort of like, you know, am I interested in this? And it's not necessarily something that I asked myself when I first started that business. What I saw was an opportunity in the market. I saw like a market inefficiency, and I became really, really interested in solving that problem. But was I passionate about photocopiers or leasing? Not really. And so when I started running into, you know, all of the hurdles that I had, ultimately it was kind of like, okay, you know, I've made the decision to stop this business. Also, I can see how I could like continue to pivot and keep it going. But do I want to keep working on this for another 2-3 years? No, I don't. And that was like a pretty big realization for me too.
Rob, I think you brought up 2 things that are worth discussion. One is that the first thing you were talking about, you said setting a goal with your MVP. And with respect to MVPs, that's not something we've really talked about yet, and I think that's really, really important. You know, your MVP can't go on forever. You got to set some hard goals and set them in advance, not during the MVP. Because if you set them during the MVP and you realize only 2 customers are interested, you may, you know, think that, oh, my goal is 1 customer, you know, which is unreasonable, really, from a back perspective. And so, setting those hard goals and being really tough on yourself with those goals is, I think, extremely important for MVPs. So it's awesome that you did that. And then the second thing you talked about, I have a story on, but you talked about the realizing that you're not passionate about something through an MVP. But I'll let you guys talk more.
No, go ahead, man. Tell us.
No, it's good. It's good. It's right on. It's like bing, bang. Things are totally connected. You're right. The time, I totally agree with you. The schedule, the time, having a goal, like, because you can get lost and you can lose your way.
In all of these things that you do as an MVP, are we doing this as a solo MVP? Like, this is my only thing for survival, or I have another business and I'm creating an MVP inside of what I'm already doing? Because I think there's a change factor in this. This is solely what I do and I'm creating an MVP. I 100% agree that you have to set goals. You have to set hard limits on anything you do, because you could drag this on forever and, you know, it'd be like going back to school and being a broke student for 4 years. Or you can say, you know what, if it doesn't work after 6 months, I don't care what I got to do. I'm going to work my ass off for 6 months. Then I shut it down no matter what if it doesn't hit X goal.
Right.
So there's always going to be that side. But if you're doing this inside of a business, you still take the same limitations on that. You still put together the 6 month time frame. You give yourselves more time when you're almost at the goal, but you're not there. You find you're more relaxed because you're like, well, I'm funding it because I've already got this great business. So do you find there's change that happens inside of that?
It's like more dangerous when it's within another company.
It is dangerous. It is, and that's something that I've experienced in the last year. And you know, looking at the numbers and the realization is, you know, it's hard, very hard, and you know, you can't go on like. It's the decision you have to make. And, you know, I think, inside of another company, because you have the whole safety net, you have everything. You have, you know, you have the infrastructure is there, all of it, the manpower. So be careful.
At Sweet Tooth, we invested a substantial amount of money into a couple projects that we were really passionate about, and got really good feedback. But at the end of the day, when we went back and we looked at the numbers, it just didn't make sense. And my mistake was letting those go on for a lot longer than I should have, because I was passionate about them.
Yeah.
But not to say, you know, passion is not extremely important, because I'll just tell you what my story was. Is I tried to start as well. One of my other MVPs was I tried to start. My idea was it was in the personal training field. So fitness personal training. My idea was to create in-home personal training care for people who were seniors. And there was a couple things that had lined up, and it looked like a great opportunity. And I went out and got data and spoke to potential customers, and there were potential customers. And then I just had to at one point sit down and say, and I realized I don't want to do this. It was something I wasn't interested in. And that's probably the first time I really learned that, man, I just really, really have to be interested in something, or else I'm just not going to be able to give it.
It's a good idea, though.
Yeah, no, so there was already somebody who was doing it, who was and they wanted to partner up, and so I didn't even have to. It's not like I would be doing the personal training, but it just, at the end of the day, I just had to give them the business and say, you know what, you take it, you run, you can take everything, but I'm just going to drag you down, because I'm just not interested in it as much as I thought I would be.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think our egos, it's hard for us to come to that, you know, to actually say that, to admit it to ourselves and say that and move forward, you know, the humble aspect.
Well, I think as entrepreneurs, we're all pretty driven, and we have a million ideas that run through our head, because it's not our first time doing this, right? It's not our first rodeo. It doesn't matter if you have one business, one product, one anything. Your brain always is trying to find ways to be more efficient, change the way something works. So every day is an MVP. Like getting on the bus, think, oh my God, if I could do it this way. I was saying earlier that I was doing the caulking around the windows with my father, and he's like, gave me all these tools to use. And I looked at it and I was like, why do I got to use 12 tools to take caulking off a window? And I just went downstairs, I drew on a piece of paper what I would do and build, and I came back up and I'm like, have you seen this before? And he's like, no. I said, good, either have I, but this is going to help us. I'm going to prototype.
Perfect.
Sure, in his head, he was like, dude, I don't need another business. I need you to take the caulking off the window.
Yeah.
But my brain wasn't thinking, it was efficiencies. How do I fix this, right? So I think at the end of the day, we're always going to have a lot of MVPs, and a lot of it's going to come from how we view the world and how we want to make corrections or alter things to make it more simplistic, if that's the case. And I think some of the cool things that, just in talking with you guys today, I think one of the things that probably stands out the most is that there is got to be a large element of planning. And I think that you can personally test something, put a diagram together, do the little things that can justify it in your brain and then have a test. But I think, as everybody's alluded to, having that timeline and time plan or money management or whatever that might be, and putting that into the ground and saying, this is my maximum I'm going to do on this. I'm passionate enough to do this far. And if I can get myself to do that, I think that's probably the biggest kick at the can. But if you don't have that stopgap, I think that's where we're all going to suffer, because we're always trying to do things, right? Your brain is always wanting to do something different. The difference with an entrepreneur is that we have very high risk tolerance to continue to do anything because we can. We've already tried it. We know we can do that, right?
Yeah.
So, you know,
Rob, you did a startup after doing an MBA, and if you guys don't know, Ivy MBAs are extremely expensive, pretty close to the Harvard MBA price, and so that is amazing. Like you have a great risk tolerance.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I might change if I were to redo it.
But I mean, to be honest, that's like, yeah.
Doing your MBA.
I just really believed in it, and I felt like that was the time to do it. You know, I didn't have any mortgage or kids or anything like that, so that's kind of what motivated me to do it. But you know, there's something to be said about putting yourself in a situation where you have to succeed, as opposed to like it was kind of like everything was a make or break decision, and it's not necessarily a good place to be, because it doesn't free you up to make the right kind of tests. You know, it doesn't free you up to like be as sort of like liberal in your testing and your. I wasn't focused on the right things because I was too worried about bringing revenue in. So that was because I started a business right after going into debt for an MBA. You know, so.
I think I totally agree that makes a lot of sense. I think what I was trying to say is that you're very courageous, like, and that's, I think, something very important for an entrepreneur, and for MVPs. It really takes great courage. That's what we were talking about initially, is that people are just afraid to fail, and you know.
I think one of the things I always said to people was that people would always come to me and say, well, how did you decide to go and start a business or do an MVP to move forward? And I would always make the recommendation that if you have a great idea and you're employed, start it right away. Because one, you've got the safety branch of the business that you work for, and creating that MVP can allow you to go out and talk to clients, talk to people, get people to sign documents to say, yeah, they're interested in your business and all of those things, right? Obviously, to an extent, you don't want to be promoting the fact that you're going to spend 90% of your time building your own company while you're employed by someone, but there's a value to it, right?
This is a great discussion you're talking about, because this is something that people ask me a lot of times, is how do you do, what should I do if I want to do an MVP I want to start a business while I'm currently working at a company? And there's, you know, obviously IP implications, there's all these other things.
Right.
That's a good discussion if you guys want to talk about that. I don't know how much more time we have.
It is. But I know the risk, though, and when you decide, like, it's not easy to be a full-time teacher, get a full-time job offer here in Toronto as a teacher, and I did, and I turned it down. And I don't know many people that do that. And it was, you know, I was basically saying, that's it, I'm going to go for this because I don't want to regret it, and that's just all I can think about. So, yeah, there is that risk, and I think it would be a great discussion to talk about, the development within another company. Yeah, what are the implications there?
Roxanne, did you do that? Did you start the business while you were a teacher?
Yeah, I was living in the Bahamas teaching art, and I got my little dog to keep me company, and he needed a harness. And so that's how it started. And the materials I was working with my students, I was a full-time art teacher, were great working materials. So it went from there, and then I came back to Toronto, Canada, and it went from there. And I was teaching here in the Toronto school board, but it just got, I got a website going, and people were ordering, and, you know, it was like, I was bringing my product to work, and it's just like, it was happening. And then, so you decide at a certain point, it's like, am I going to do this? And that's what I did. I mean, it was like, people were like, what? You're turning down a full-time teaching job? Yeah.
So were there IP implications, like with intellectual property? Do schools put those in place? Like tech companies for sure will have.
Yeah, you know, I would think if it came to tech, there might be some issues. And I mean, I think about, as being an art teacher too, some of the stuff like design, and there were some really interesting things that could happen potentially. And I'm not sure what the implications are there. I mean, I'm incredibly discreet, so I wasn't, you know, doing so much there, but. I was doing business with faculty, you know, they were buying my product, but I think you're right. There are implications.
I think one of the solutions to the implications is something that you just said, is discreet. Some people will try to build MVPs, and they're like, all right, I'm going to do my launch next week while I'm still at the, and then quit the company, and I'm going to do a launch. I'm like, why?
Be discretionary.
If you can sell the product, and then just wait, just I
think that's a skill, you know, like, or is that a skill? Discretion, being discretionary. I don't know. Or is that inherent? Is that something that you have as a character? It's important.
No.
Well, I like that story because.
What's that?
It's being able to look back on the things that you're going through with anything, right? It's the breaking personal versus business.
Right.
Supposed to be on your own time. And I think I found too that a lot of it now, like take 10 years ago, when somebody wanted to start something, everybody in your family would probably tell you, no.
Oh,
what do you mean? Go on your own? Are you crazy? Go get a job or stay in a job. It's a safety blanket. And businesses, you never had people that would have call it a dual identity, where they would be working 9 to 5, and then at night they would be starting and working as an entrepreneur or working in a restaurant or whatever they might be doing. So you did have a lot of that, right? So I think now in the last 5 years, people have looked at it and said, wait a second, I can run a second business after I'm done my 9 to 5. And I can go and build an e-commerce platform, or I can sell on Shopify, or I can make crafts, whatever they chose to do. It's become a secondary piece. So maybe that's where now, as Jay was saying, that businesses have caught on to this and said, wait, like even the government has, and the government says, if you're working for us, you can't do any work on the side.
All right.
I think that off, right? Yeah. So is that common in business? I wouldn't know, I've been there 10 years, but is it common for a business person to say, when you get hired for Walmart or anybody else, they say, you know what, you're here full time, you aren't allowed to run a secondary business. If you do, we own the IP of it.
So the general rule within any company that has any IP, so this would include companies, this is pretty much all tech companies that have, like, you know, are established, is that anything you do either on their hardware, so if you're doing it on their computer or you're doing it on their time, it's owned by them. And as long as you do it outside of that, they can put whatever enforcements that they want. But time and time again, we've seen that they will lose in court because judges just don't like that.
And the other thing is just
that makes sense.
It's really hard to verify. Like, as long as you're not sitting at work during your 9 to 5 working on your startup or whatever, then they can't really tell you what to do on your own time.
No, they can't. That's right.
I used to. I mean, it's an interesting question. I like your story, Roxanne, because I used to be of the mind that's like, yeah, just quit your job and kind of go all in. But now that I've kind of had that experience, there's so much thrashing that you have to do at the very beginning of the process.
It's not for the faint of heart at all.
Yeah, and
it's not
you
easy.
need to quit your job to start designing your product. No, you don't. You don't need to. when you quit your job is when it's gotten to the point where there's so much demand on your time for this business, you know.
You got to make the business. You got to produce and deliver.
Exactly.
Yeah, so just spend the weekend, Rob.
You know that it's actually bumping up against your work time, and then it becomes really obvious. It's kind of like when you know that you have to hire someone new. You know, it's like you're spending way too much time doing this one thing, and you're neglecting other duties or whatever that you have to do, and now you know that you have to hire someone. It's the same kind of thing when you're deciding to start your own business.
And that's a big risk too, because you know you get your first employee and you're like, oh yeah, sure, I'll be able to pay you this much, and you realize like, oh, I better go get that line of credit and stick it over there just so I make sure I'm making their pay. And you know, there's no looking back. I mean, it's years later, and I've never defaulted on any payments or checks or but that first time, it's big. It's big.
No, that's so it's interesting. There's a whole story that's kind of coming out of this, and maybe this is the perfect time to kind of wrap ourselves around what we talked about, and I know we've been on for a while, so maybe I'll give that kind of snapshot. But it sounds like for that entrepreneur that's trying to get into the space and says, I want to build an MVP. Well, if you have a job, you don't need to just drop the thing and jump into your startup, because there's a lot of risk that you can mitigate. So mitigate that risk by taking a step back, start slowly working on your MVP, which is testing it with yourself and then going a little bit further. Spend as little as possible to get that beta product or that MVP product going. And then once you get to that threshold, if it's a launch or post-launch, put your parameters together. So actually put that plan together that says, I'm going to work on this for the next 6 months tops. This is going to give me a bird's eye view in. I'm only going to be putting in so much time anyhow, so that'll at least give me my burn rate and run rate, everything else to get to the 6 months. And then at that point is where I make the call and say, what is this for me? And this is where I need to be. And then once you decide to move forward, then that's where you take jump ship and decide to move away from your business and really plow into it. And I think one of the things that I've learned over the years too is that it really does take a lot of passion, and the people, and maybe you all agree to this, but as soon as you meet someone that runs a business that has passion, your energy level goes through the roof. You're just like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what I just met. This dude's like way up here. It goes crazy. And they got a sick product or they got something cool, and you almost feel like you should just be investing in their company or doing something with them, because the passion is so strong. It's just unbelievable. And it could be the easiest, simplest thing in the world. Their passion could be like, we met a guy a couple of weeks ago at a talk, and he does 3D animation, and the passion he had when he talked about his business, I had to go sit down with him again and have a coffee just because I was so amazed in how he got there and everything else. And I think that really makes a big difference too with someone that once they get to that point where they're just all in, they've tested it, proven it, and now they're in. So I think that we can all certainly learn from that, right?
Definitely.
Try not to do too many things at once.
No, I mean, but when you are sort of building that initial, prototype, and you're, working your full-time job, and you're not ready for that jump off the ship yet, but in some ways it prepares you for like those sleepless hours and very little kind of time outside of it. So yeah, it's a step by step.
And we probably never even got into how much time do you actually think you need to put into an MVP, like you just mentioned.
Yeah, there is that too.
All of those things, right? Like, is it better to do it when you don't have a family or when you do have a family? Or are you allowed to live in the dungeon for the next 6 to 12 months while you try to build all this stuff out?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff we could probably obviously continue talking.
Cash flow, yeah, like bringing in cash flow. Like how do you just manage that? People have hard times. So.
For sure, survival is the key, right? So there's a lot. MVP dictates so many different things, but and I think.
I just wanted to add in just one thing with the MVP is the doing. Try not to do too many things. Don't do too many MVPs, but to be clear, I think you should do a lot of things within your MVP. So if you can speak to customers, even though you're an engineer. If you can't, if you're a salesperson, you try to build the website, like try to get a basic website with a free website maker, like try to get as much as you possibly can with your current skills so that you can gather as much information as you possibly can in the amount of time that you have, and gather as much data as you possibly can. And so do a lot just within your MVP. Yeah, but I agree. Don't do 10 MVPs at once. That's just way too hard.
Yeah, you'll never be able to get there. We're not 15 anymore.
No.
Yeah.
Focus.
Exactly. All right, that was awesome. Well, you know what? Maybe we'll end it there. If I know there was a couple of things. Ricardo, who is our MVP, Ricardo's awesome. He posted that they use it's called beta when they launch a new program in his business. So that's something we're looking at as well. But outside of that, I thank you guys very much for jumping in and having a discussion. We'll do it again many more times, and you guys are always welcome to join in some of the other ones that we do. But by all means, keep doing those great things that you are. And looking forward to keeping connected with you guys, and appreciate all the valuable information. And we're gonna push this all out, and you guys will get that soon.
That's great. I promise to figure out my upgrades and when I'm sort of settled for a few days, and then I can log on the right time.
No, that's cool. And there's a video too that Roxanne wanted us to play. So I'm not sure if I haven't actually tested how to play a video inside of this. So I posted the link so you guys can check it out. I can push it, but I think it'll just do audio because I don't know if there's a way to play it that would take my screen over.
You can test it, or if you have the link, it's.
Once upon a time,
I'm assuming you can hear it, but can you see it?
Yeah.
Can't see it. I'm gonna have to jump off now, guys. But thanks for having me, and thanks, Megan and Kristen for
Nice to meet you, Rob. It's great. I missed some of your story, so I'll have to hear that. I'll ask you and maybe talk again soon. So.
Okay.
You bet. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care. Ciao.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.